All right, how's everybody doing? Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. So it is Friday, May 24th, 2019, and we are live. I was just testing out this new microphone, this new Yeti blue microphone. So it's working pretty well. So I wanted to talk about this topic. I didn't get a chance to talk about this on Wednesday, May 22nd. It was so busy, and I did a broadcast dealing with Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi and Trump lying about their meeting and Trump lying in this Rose Garden little press conference, his debacle, his tirade that he had. So go watch that on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. Click on videos or at our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. But I want to talk about this story dealing with Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. Now, I first talked about this story going back to 2015 when it was first announced that Harriet Tubman and some other ladies may be on the $20 bill. Okay, I read an article by Kirsten West Savali for theroot.com, and then also a previous article from theroot.com dealing with this. Okay, so we know this past Wednesday on May 22nd, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin was testifying in front of the House Finance Committee in Congress. And he was asked by Representative Ayanna Pressley about the change to the $20 bill, okay? The design change to the $20 bill, and Harriet Tubman was supposed to be on the $20 bill, okay? And his response of why it's going to be delayed, it's going to be delayed basically till about 2028. And this is after Trump leaves the White House, even if he gets reelected to a second term, which most sane people are praying and working to make sure he does not get reelected to a second term. He has to be voted out of office. Period. Okay. If he is not impeached, okay, he has to be voted out of office. So I want to deal with this story here. New York Times is a good article. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay. And African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Okay. Email us at customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so let's look at this article from, let's go to the first one from theroot.com. This is from Kirsten West Savali, April 13th, 2015. Name of this article is Why We Should Keep Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks Off the $20 Bill. Why we should keep Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks off the $20 bill. Now, I don't agree with her conclusion, but just look at let's look at the background information on how this came about. Okay, so she said Harriet Tubman or Rosa Parks may be the next face featured on the U.S. $20 bill. That is, if Women on 20s, W20, Women on 20s, which is a grassroots organization committed to the realization of female representation on the nation's currency, has anything to say about it. Now, after a robust voting process spearheaded by W20, Women on 20s, the civil rights icons, along with former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and Wilma Mankiller, who was the first female chief of the Cherokee Nation, Native Americans, Cherokee Nation. They were selected from a multi-generational pool of accomplished women spanning diverse industries. Okay, so there was this ties into the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which would be 1920. The 19th Amendment gave white women the right to vote. Okay, gave white women the right to vote because African American women did. Well, let me rephrase that. Because even the 15th Amendment of 1870 only applied to African American men. Okay, and but basically, it's going to be the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that really protects the voting rights of African American women. Now, in northern states, you had African American women who could vote prior to 1965, but still you're dealing with Jim Crow laws in you're dealing with Jim Crow in the South largely, and it's putting impediments. It's putting impedance in front of obstacles in front of African Americans being able to vote, both men and women. Okay, but the 19th Amendment basically applied to white women. All right, so quote, we believe this simple, symbolic, and long overdue change could be an important stepping stone for other initiatives promoting gender equality, said Women on 20 on its website. Quote, our money does say something about us, about what we value. Our money does say something about us, about what we value. Okay, so they had a petition. They had an online petition, over 300,000. There was like over 300,000 votes casted. And there's a their actual website for Women on 20s is women20s.org. T0S. Women on20s.org. Women on20s.org. Okay. And actually there is a I saw the I saw the actual post they had. I think it's under campaign results. And they talk about how many people voted, with something like over 300,000 votes casted and things like this. Let me see results. Okay, I think it's under results, campaign and results. Voter totals. Let's see, total by May 10th, there was 609,000, looks like votes casted. Okay, let me see. And okay, so there were 118,000 votes for Harriet Tubman, 111,000 votes for Eleanor Roosevelt, 64,000 votes for Rosa Parks, 58,000 votes for Wilma Mankiller. Okay. So it breaks down. We'll post this link here. This is from womenon20s.org. And at the top of their website, it has campaign and results. You click on that down arrow for the drop down menu, click on results. Okay. So they break this down. I'm giving you some background information on how this came about. Okay. And this was under the Obama administration. All right. So Harriet Tubman was supposed to be on the $20 bill. All right. You're going to have Marianne. You're going to have Dr. King on the $5 bill, and Marianne Ross also on the $5 bill as well. So New York Times reported on May 22nd, Wednesday, May 22nd. They have an article, Harriet Tubman $20 bill is delayed until Trump leaves office, Mnuchin says. This is Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. And the article says Harriet Tubman, former slave abolitionist, conductor on the Underground Railroad, will not become the face of the $20 bill until after Donald Trump leaves office, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said on Wednesday. Now, plans to unveil the Harriet Tubman bill in 2020, which was an Obama administration initiative, would be postponed until at least the year 2026, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said, and the bill itself would not likely be in circulation until 2028. Until then, bills with former President Andrew Jackson, who was a white supremacist slave owner, who also signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which drove thousands of Native Americans off their land in the southeastern United States and forced them out west on what's known as the Trail of Tears, over 1,000 miles. And they all went into Oklahoma, and a third of the people with them were African slaves, because this pertained to the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians, what are collectively known as the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans, and they all owned African slaves as well. So we have President Andrew Jackson to thank for that, who it just so happens is Donald Trump's favorite president. Imagine that. So until then, bills with former President Andrew Jackson's face will continue to pour out of ATMs and fill Americans' wallets. Now, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, concerned that the president might create an uproar by canceling the new bill altogether, was eager to delay its redesign until Donald Trump was out of office, some senior Treasury Department officials have said. Now, as a presidential candidate in 2016, Donald Trump criticized the Obama administration's plans for the bill. That April, Donald Trump April 2016, called the change, quote, pure political correctness, quote unquote. And he suggested that Harriet Tubman, whom he praised, could be added to a far less common denomination like the $2 bill. He said, quote, Andrew Jackson had a great history, and I think it's very rough when you take somebody off the bill, end quote, Donald Trump said at the time. What was Andrew Jackson's great history? What was his great history? Furthermore, Andrew Jackson was against paper money. So if you actually study the history of Andrew Jackson, he was against paper money. So it doesn't even really make sense to have Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill because he was against paper money in the first place. So Donald Trump has frequently described President Andrew Jackson, whose portrait hangs in the Oval Office, as a populist hero who reminds him of himself. 2 months into his presidency, Donald Trump stopped to lay a wreath at Andrew Jackson's tomb at the Hermitage, which is Andrew Jackson's plantation in Nashville, Tennessee. Okay, it was during the revolution that Jackson first confronted and defied an arrogant elite, end quote, Donald Trump said. He told this to a crowd gathered there. He said, quote, does that sound familiar, end quote. Now, the delay comes 3 years after Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin's predecessor, Jacob J. Lew, L-E-W, announced plans for a sweeping and symbolic redrawing of the currency that would see Harriet Tubman replace the slave-holding Andrew Jackson on the face of the $20 bill. Now, Treasury Department officials did not say whether Donald Trump had a hand in the decision, and Steve Mnuchin would not say whether he himself believes that Harriet Tubman should be on the bill's face. Steve Mnuchin said, I've made no decision as it relates to that. He said Wednesday at a congressional hearing in response to a question from Representative Ayanna Pressley, a Democrat from Massachusetts. This was the House Finance Committee. Now, during the hearing, Steve Mnuchin said that he was now focused on enhancing the anti-counterfeiting security features of the currency, focusing first on the $10 bill and $50 bills. Designing new imagery is on the back burner. Okay. He said, quote, it is my responsibility now to focus on what is the issue of counterfeiting and the security features, Steve Mnuchin said. The ultimate decision on the design will most likely be another secretary down the road. So he's kicking the can down the road. Now, replacing Andrew Jackson with Harriet Tubman was both filled with symbolism and marred by controversy. Okay, now so somebody made let me see, there was an article from not Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. Washington Post editorial board, May 23rd. Joanne Reed just talked about it. Joanne Reed talked about it on the Friday, May 24th edition of the Rachel Maddow show. Joanne Reed was guest hosting for Rachel Maddow. And the editorial board from the Washington Post has an article, Mnuchin's excuse for delaying the Harriet Tubman $20 bill is insulting. Mnuchin's excuse for delaying the Harriet Tubman $20 bill is insulting. So he's insinuating that he's going to delay he's going to delay the new $20 bill to focus in on counterfeiting. Okay. In the article, it says the explanation that Steve Mnuchin offered for the delay, the need for more time for, quote, counterfeiting issues, end quote, would be laughable if it were not so insulting. Are we really expected to believe that the administration, one that boasts about about its can-do capabilities needs 8 more years to implement a new design. If indeed counterfeiting matters are the primary reason for currency design, shouldn't you start with the $20 bill, since it is one of the most widely circulated? If his argument is about fighting against counterfeiting or quote unquote counterfeiting issues, shouldn't you start with the $20 bill, since it's one of the most widely circulated? Now, it is more likely that Steve Mnuchin, as the New York Times reported, feared Donald Trump would cause an uproar with an outright cancellation of a bill bearing Harriet Tubman's image. As a candidate, Donald Trump criticized the decision as, quote, political correctness, end quote, and he has made no secret of his admiration of President Andrew Jackson, whose image Harriet Tubman would have dislodged from the front of the $20 bill. Okay. Now, some would argue there are bigger issues facing the country than who is on the $20 bill, and no doubt the administration is guilty of far more serious offenses. But symbols matter. Backpedaling on putting the African-American woman on paper money tells women and girls and people of color that they don't and never have mattered. Now, Donald Trump has found yet another way to show that he does not really aspire to be the president of all Americans. So this is from the editorial board at the Washington Post. Now, I remember somebody made the suggestion back in about 2015, or actually 2016, going back to 2016, because it was first announced going in 2015, and then in 2016, the actual results came out of the vote. Somebody made the suggestion, we'll put Harriet Tubman on the front of the bill and put Andrew Jackson on the back of the bill. Okay. And then you had other people, as well as myself, said that wouldn't be a good idea, because then what you would have is a slave owner on Harriet Tubman's back. So that wouldn't be a good idea either. So let me share this link here dealing with, this is the article from the editorial board of the Washington Post. Mnuchin's excuse for delaying the Harriet Tubman $20 bill is insulting. Okay. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. We have Onique, Gino, Ronald, just a few of the people watching. Christopher, Secretary Christopher, can you post the information from the Secretary of Treasury? Yeah, here's the article from the New York Times. Other outlets have articles about this as well. Name of this article once again: Harriet Tubman $20 bill is delayed until Trump leaves office, Mnuchin says. So let's post this link here. That's from the New York Times. And you can Google that topic. You just Google Harriet Tubman $20 bill. All the news outlets have had articles about this. Shayla, Patrick, just a few of the people watching. Okay. All right, so let's continue. Then African-American business owners post the name of your business here in the thread of the broadcast. And we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Also, we have a couple new advertisers. So we have a few spots left, and we have a new advertiser, which is Mercedes Waffles and More. Mercedes Waffles and More, and Mercedes Waffles can handle your catering needs. They are located in the New York City area. Okay, visit their website, MercedesWafflesandMore.com. MercedesWafflesandMore.com. They are a catering only business. They want people to come together and have food that tastes good, feels good, and is good for you. It's the ultimate comfort food. It's soul food made with vegan and vegetarian ingredients. Their food provides that home cooked meal feeling, while being mindful of each person's nutritional needs. Connecting people with and through food. They cater to all budgets. Give them a call, area code 914-200-4493, 914-200-4493. And Mercedes will also be a vendor at the Multicultural Festival in New York City. The Multicultural Festival in New York City, they cater to the New York City area as well as New Jersey. That Multicultural Festival is taking place June 1st, 2019, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So look out for Mercedes waffles and more there also. Okay. African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast and email us at customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network also, okay? Our current promotion is get 2 months for the price of one. All right, so let's continue dealing with the story of Harriet Tubman. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, we learn about Harriet Tubman during African American History Month, Black History Month. We learn about it in school. She's one of the safe African American historical figures to talk about. Okay, her legacy has been distorted as well. Okay, she's looked at oftentimes as non-threatening. Okay, so it's all right to talk about her because you know, I guess she was a slave and she served in the Civil War. She was a nurse and a spy in the Civil War also. But a lot of people don't know that Harriet Tubman was the only woman to lead a military raid during the Civil War. That was June 2nd, 1863, the Combahee River raid in South Carolina. Okay, so let's go back to this article from the New York Times. So during the hearing, Steve Mnuchin said that he is now focused on enhancing the anti-counterfeiting security features of the currency, focusing first on the $10 bill and $50 bills. He's going to skip over the $20 bills. Designing new imagery is on the back burner. Okay, he said, it is my responsibility now to focus on what is the issue of counterfeiting and the security features. He said the ultimate decision on the redesign will most likely be another secretary down the road, end quote. Now, replacing President Andrew Jackson with Harriet Tubman was both filled with symbolism and marred by controversy. Harriet Tubman was born into slavery. She was born in either between 1819 to 1823, because she didn't have a birth certificate. We don't know exactly. Okay, when we look at the article from Deneen L. Brown for the Washington Post, whether she's on the $20 bill or not, Harriet Tubman made men pay for underestimating her. She talks about how Harriet Tubman was born between 1819 and 1823. When we look at the article dealing with the history of Harriet Tubman from blackpast.org, they put her birth, the year she was born at 1821. But slaves didn't have birth certificates, okay, basically. So it's estimated she was born between 1819 to 1823, but we know she died in 1913, the year before World War I started, which started in 1914. Okay, so Harriet Tubman was born into slavery, and she escaped from a plantation in Maryland in 1849 and then returned to the South, where she led other slaves to freedom. She was a Union scout during the Civil War and later advocated for women's rights later in her life. Now, Andrew Jackson orchestrated the removal of Native Americans from lands to the east of the Mississippi River and sent them marching west on the so-called Trail of Tears. Okay. So in 2017, speculation began that Donald Trump might scrap the former Secretary of Treasury Lou's plan for the $20 bill when mentions of it were scrubbed from the Treasury Department's website during a redesign. This is in 2017. Trump took the oath of office that he's violated January 20th, 2017. He's in violation of his office to protect the Constitution and the U.S. from enemies, both foreign and domestic. He's in violation of his oath, okay, which is one of the reasons why he should be impeached. Now, then that August of 2017, Secretary Steve Mnuchin made clear that Harriet Tubman's future on the bill was in doubt. Okay, he told CNBC, people have been on the bills for a long period of time. This is something we'll consider. Right now, we've got a lot more important issues to focus on. Okay, now, Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat of New Hampshire recently introduced the Harriet Tubman Tribute Act, and called on the Treasury Department to offer clarity on the status of the $20 bill. The legislation, if passed, would direct the department to place the likeness of Harriet Tubman on $20 Federal Reserve notes printed after December 31st, 2020. Printed after December 31st, 2020. Okay, now, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said, quote, "There is no excuse for the administration's failure to make this redesign a priority. There is no excuse for the administration's failure to make this redesign a priority. Sadly, this delay sends an unmistakable message to women and girls and communities of color who were promised they'd see Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill." Now, supporters of the Tribute Act in the House of Representatives include Representative Elijah Cummings, who is he's the chair of the House Oversight Committee, Elijah Cummings, and a Democrat from Maryland, and also John Katko, I guess it is Katko, Republican of New York. They also expressed frustration with Donald Trump's administration over the delay. Now, Representative Elijah Cummings said the administration's decision to drag their feet and delay the redesign on the $20 bill until 2028 is unacceptable. Our currency must reflect the important role, and especially women of color. Our currency must reflect the important role, and especially women of color have played in our nation's history. Okay, now he should say Black women, African American women. I understand women of color because you're talking about non-white women, but you need to also say specifically Black women, African American women. Okay, now former Treasury Secretary Lew, L-E-W, through a spokeswoman, had no comment on Wednesday, May 22nd. But Gene Sperling, the former director of President Barack Obama's National Economic Council, assailed current Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin on Twitter for embracing Donald Trump's divisiveness. Okay. Gene Sperling on Twitter said, quote, "Today, Mnuchin pathetically announces that Tubman on $20 bill, Tubman on $20 will be delayed till 2028, meaning their goal is never," end quote. Now, women have appeared on United States currency a handful of times, often on seldom used $1 coins. Okay. Now, in the 19th century, Pocahontas and Martha Washington were the first women to make it onto American currency and the last to make it onto paper. Okay. Now, Pocahontas appeared among, and I didn't even know this before this article about Pocahontas. Pocahontas appeared among a group of men on the $10 bill and the $20 bill in the late 19th century. Okay, the late 1800s. Martha Washington, wife of George Washington, was on $1 silver certificates in 1886, 1891, and 1896. The suffragist Susan B. Anthony, who also did not like the fact that African-American men got the right to vote before white women, by the way, just saying. The suffragist Susan B. Anthony was the first woman to appear on an American coin, a dollar produced from 1979 to 1981, and again briefly in 1999. But originally, the Treasury Department planned to depict the allegorical Lady Liberty. Now, it was not until legislators and activists objected that the department agreed to honor a real-life woman. Okay, it was not until legislators and activists objected that the Treasury Department agreed to honor a real-life woman. Now, in 2015, Treasury Secretary Lew started a 10-month process to develop a plan that was initially intended to honor a female historical figure on the $10 bill, replacing Alexander Hamilton. After much controversy, consternation, and public debate, in part because of the popularity of the musical Hamilton, which is based on the secretary's life, okay, Alexander Hamilton, Secretary Lew changed course and instead made plans for a vignette of suffragists to be put on the back of the $10 bill and for Harriet Tubman to be the face of the $20 bill, okay? And that came from the petition and the votes from people signing the petition from the organization Women on 20s. So on Wednesday, May 22nd, activists from the group Women on 20s, which helped push Harriet Tubman to the prominence of the $20 bill, were disappointed but hopeful that the delay in a statement calling on Congress to pass legislation to add Harriet Tubman to the currency. They said, quote, at Women on 20s, we're not surprised that Secretary Mnuchin may be kicking the design reveal of the $20 bill to sometime beyond the potential interference of a Trump presidency. Okay, as we've been saying for years, symbols do matter. All right, so check out this article from the New York Times. This is dealing with the delay in the Harriet Tubman $20 bill. Okay, we know you have one guy who created a stamp that you can use as a rubber stamp to put Harriet Tubman's face on the $20 bill if you just decide that you got to have her on a $20 bill that much. USA Today has an article about it, as well as Detroit Free Press. I saw an article about this today. We know on the Rachel Maddow show, the May 24th, 2019 edition of the Rachel Maddow show, Joanne Reed was guest hosting. She interviewed this gentleman as well. He's a white guy who created this stamp. Okay, and trying to see if I can find an article here from USA Today. We'll post it here on the thread of the broadcast also, because I don't have it here. Okay, can you all still hear me on Facebook? It's trying to reconnect. We're having a poor signal. Stand by. Okay, who we still have here? Stand by, everybody is trying to reconnect. Okay, let's see. Crystal, Gino, stand by. Also, there was another good article talked about briefly earlier from Deneen L. Brown for the Washington Post. Whether she's on the $20 bill or not, Harriet Tubman made men pay for underestimating her. So this article talked some about the history of Harriet Tubman. Okay, so she was 5 feet tall. She was born between 1819 and 1823. She was 5 feet tall. She, at one point, there was a bounty on her head of for a total of $40,000. Let's see. You had slave masters who put collectively a bounty on her head of $40,000. Harriet Tubman said that I had reasoned this out in my mind. There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other. This talks about her, running away from a plantation in Maryland in 1849. Okay, so let me see here. It's still trying to reconnect. All right. Okay, so, and let me know if you all can still see on Facebook. All right, they said they can hear. I'm not sure if they can still see. So now Harriet Tubman was not her birth name. Okay, her birth name was Araminta Ross. Araminta. Araminta Ross was her birth name. And she was born between 1819 to 1823 on the eastern shore of Maryland, where officials recently dedicated landscapes and waterways at the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Historic National Park. All right, and let me flip over to the article here also from the Washington Post. I think I have, okay. All right, let me just a second. Let me pull up this article here from the Washington Post, because I have a bunch of them, a bunch of tabs up, and I want to actually pull this one up. All right, so Harriet Tubman's maternal grandmother had arrived in the country via the Middle Passage, okay, on a slave ship. Harriet Tubman was enslaved by a man named Edward Brodess, Brodess, okay? And let's see here. Just give me a second. I need to pull this article up. Once again, the name of this article is Whether She's on the $20 Bill or Not. Harriet Tubman Made Men Pay for Underestimating Her, okay? This is from the Washington Post, written by Deneen L. Brown, May 22nd, 2019. Now, when she was about 13 years old, okay, she refused to help a slave overseer capture a runaway slave. And let me see, what is this doing? Okay, she refused to help a slave overseer capture a runaway slave. Now, the overseer threw a 2-pound lead weight at the runaway. The weight mistakenly hit Harriet Tubman in the head, splitting her skull, according to the Harriet Tubman Museum and Education Center in Cambridge, Maryland. Okay, now Harriet Tubman was unconscious for 2 or 3 days and will continue to suffer chronic seizures the rest of her life. The injury caused sleeping spells or narcolepsy, okay, which could cause her to drop into a deep sleep anywhere and at any time. But she still persisted. So even though she had narcolepsy, a lot of people don't know this, even though Harriet Tubman had narcolepsy, she still persisted, made 19 or 20 trips to plantations in Maryland to free not just her family, but other enslaved Africans. Okay. And she also led a military raid as well in the Civil War, the Combahee River Raid of June 2nd, 1863. And let me try to pull this article up here in Google Chrome. How's everybody doing today? Just stand by. Let's pull it up here in Google Chrome. All right. All right, now, you know, the history of slavery is a very nuanced history. This is why I'm careful not to do just gross generalizations of slavery, what happened, things like this. Slavery is a very nuanced history. Okay, so you really have to study it to understand the history of slavery. But when we look at Harriet Tubman, who became Harriet Tubman, born Araminta Ross, she married a man named John Tubman, who was a free man. So you do have cases where you had enslaved African Americans marrying free African Americans. Okay. Now, her slave master at the time, Brodess, tried to sell her as damaged property, but failed because she was hit in the head and had narcoleptic seizures. So he tried again to sell her when Harriet Tubman was 26 years old. Harriet Tubman prayed that God would kill her slave master. A week later, he was dead. Now, in 1844, Harriet Tubman married John Tubman, okay, a free black man, and she changed her first name to Harriet, which was her mother's name, and took her husband's last name, Tubman. This is where the Tubman comes from. This is where the Harriet comes from. She was born Araminta Ross. Now, in 1849, worried she and others would be sold to another plantation, Harriet Tubman decided to escape Okay. She could not convince her husband, John Tubman, to leave with her. So she escaped with two of her brothers and she left her husband behind. Her two brothers' names were Ben and Henry. Okay. Ben and Henry. And this was on the Poplar Neck Plantation, Poplar, Poplar Neck Plantation. But soon her two brothers, Ben and Henry, became frightened and turned back, according to the Tubman Museum. Now, Harriet Tubman continued her journey, traveling by foot 90 miles, crossing Delaware and arriving in Pennsylvania. Okay, Pennsylvania's in the north. Pennsylvania's free territory at this time. By this time, Pennsylvania's free territory. And Harriet Tubman would say later, quote, "I had crossed the line. I was free, but there was no one to welcome me to the land of freedom. I was a stranger in a strange land," end quote. Now, in Philadelphia, she worked as a household servant and saved up enough money to return to the South to help others escape. In 1850, Harriet Tubman returned to Maryland for her niece and her niece's husband. A year later, in 1851, she returned for her husband, John Tubman, who was a free African-American man, but he had taken another wife by this time. Despite danger and laws carrying severe penalties for helping enslaved people escape, Harriet Tubman kept returning. Now, according to an 1849 Maryland law, assisting or encouraging an enslaved person to escape carried penalties of imprisonment, threats to be sold further into the South, because the conditions were usually harsher on plantations deeper in the South, and a punishment of, quote, 39 stripes with a whip, end quote. So that means 39 slashes with a whip. So slave owners issued huge rewards for Harriet Tubman's capture. By 1856, rewards for her added up to $40,000. That's about $1 million in today's currency, according to the Tubman Museum, according to the Harriet Tubman Museum. Still, she kept coming back. She made at least 19 trips, freeing more than 300 enslaved people, guided by the North Star along the Underground Railroad. Okay, now the Underground Railroad did not come into existence until about 1831. Okay, largely towards the end of chattel slavery in this country, because the Civil War starts in 1861. Now, in 1854, Harriet Tubman came back for her brothers. 3 years later, in 1857, she returned for her mother and father and journeyed with them all the way into Canada. On her return trip, she would often sing "Come Down Moses," okay, "Come Down Moses," a warning notice to those who wanted to escape that she was ready to guide them. People called her the Moses of her people. She also carried a gun. She carried a pistol. And she said, quote, "If anyone ever wanted to change his or her mind during the journey to freedom and return," Tubman pulled out a gun and said, "You'll be free or die a slave. You'll be free or die a slave," according to a Library of Congress account of her life. Now, Harriet Tubman, so it said, quote, "Tubman knew that if anyone turned back, it would put her and other escaping slaves in danger of discovery, capture, or even death." Okay. And this is a statement from the Library of Congress. So I refer to Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, who else? Ida B. Wells and Fannie Lou Hamer. I refer to all of them as the original ride or die chicks, because all those sisters carried guns. Okay. All those sisters carried guns. How you doing, Cynthia? Patrick, how you doing, Patrick? Letitia, okay. How's everybody doing? I'm recording this with my video camera, also with a separate camera, so we'll upload to Facebook the full video that I'm recording on the video camera, because the broadcast is screwed up. The video is screwed up. It's something it's a poor wireless connection. Don't know why, because I'm not paying Comcast poor money, so I'm not sure why the connection is poor, but that's some more stuff for me to figure out. Okay. All right. So now historians still marvel at Harriet Tubman's brilliance in avoiding capture and her stealth. She often dressed like a man. Bounty hunters did not realize it was a woman helping people escape. Now, Harriet Tubman once told a story about how on one of her recent trips to Maryland, she passed one of her old owners, old slave masters, walking down the same side of the street. He did not recognize her, and she did not flinch. Now, during the Civil War, Harriet Tubman worked as a nurse, a cook, and a spy for the Union Army. Now, according to the book, Harriet Tubman's Secret Agent by Thomas Allen, Harriet Tubman worked as a spy for the Union and was connected to the abolitionist John Brown, who led the raid against a federal armory in Harper's Ferry, Virginia in 1859. Okay. And this is now West Virginia. All right. So when John Brown was arrested, he was carrying papers that connected him to Harriet Tubman, who he called General Tubman. John Brown referred to Harriet Tubman as he and him. Now, Thomas Allen, author of the book Harriet Tubman's Secret Agent, wrote that Harriet Tubman was the only woman who led men into battle during the Civil War. Harriet Tubman persuaded formerly enslaved men to track Confederate camps and report on their movements. He said, quote, in 1863, she went with Colonel James Montgomery and about 150 black soldiers on a gunboat raid in South Carolina, according to the Library of Congress. Quote, because she had inside information from her scouts, the Union gunboats were able to surprise the Confederate rebels, end quote. Now, they raided plantations in South Carolina and set fire to buildings, destroying bridges and freeing more slaves. Quote, at first, when the Union Army came through and burned plantations, slaves hid in the woods, okay, according to the Library of Congress. But when they realized that the gunboats could take them behind Union lines to freedom, they came running from all directions, bringing as many of their belongings as they could carry. Harriet Tubman later said, quote, I never saw such a sight, end quote. So this was the Combahee River raid that took place June 2nd, 1863. So Harriet Tubman was the only woman to lead a military raid during the U.S. Civil War. Blackpast.org has an article about this. I do a whole lecture called Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. So that's a 4-hour DVD lecture. It's available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. And Harriet Tubman is just one of the many women that I talk about in this presentation. It's a 4-hour DVD lecture. It's available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. Well, if we look quickly here at the article from blackpast.org, Combahee River Raid, Combahee. This took place June 2nd, 1863. Harriet Tubman, under the command of Union Colonel James Montgomery, led 150 black Union soldiers in the Combahee River Raid. Tubman, often referred to as the Moses of her people, was a former slave who fled to freedom in 1849. Harriet Tubman had been working for years to bring slaves from the South to the North, okay, through the Underground Railroad. Now, on the night of June 2nd, 1863, 3 federal gunboats set sail from Beaufort, South Carolina, up the Combahee River. Harriet Tubman had gained vital information about the location of rebel torpedoes planted along the river from slaves who were willing to trade information for freedom, okay? Because we were trying to do anything we could to be free, okay? The whole concept, the whole myth of this happy slave who just loved the slave master and did not want to be free, that was largely created by the South, okay? We were trying to do whatever we could oftentimes to be free. Now, there were many cases where we chose to stay on the plantation as opposed to being free, but usually that had to do with us trying to keep our families together, because usually when slaves ran away, it wasn't an entire family that ran away. You do have some cases of that, but those are rarer. Usually runaways were male slaves who didn't have children, didn't have a family. They were teenagers or early 20s, usually did not have an entire family who ran away, even though there were documented cases of this. That was not the majority of them. But you had a lot of cases of African Americans who chose to stay on the plantation because they were trying to protect their families and keep their families together, hoping for one day that they could all be free. So because of this information, okay, about the location of rebel torpedoes, Confederate torpedoes that were torpedoes that belonged to the Confederacy, okay, the Confederate States of America, the rebels. Because of this information, Harriet Tubman was able to steer the Union ships away from any danger of these torpedoes. She led the ships to specific spots along the shore where fugitive slaves were hiding and waiting to be rescued. At first, many of the slaves were frightened, okay? And I have this article pulled up here. Okay, so at first, many of the slaves were frightened by the Union soldiers. Let's pull this up. By the Union soldiers. All right, just a second here. Let me pull this up here. Okay, so at first, many of the slaves were frightened by the Union soldiers' presence, but Harriet Tubman was able to talk with them and convince them to come aboard the ship. Okay, as Lincoln's gunboats traveled up the river, more slaves were rescued, and eventually 750 enslaved Africans boarded the vessels. Okay, so the Combahee River raid of June 2nd, 1863, led by Harriet Tubman, freed 750 enslaved Africans. So the boats, however, had a specific military mission. They carried Union troops who came on shore and succeeded in destroying several influential South Carolina estates owned by leading secessionists. Okay, secessionists, those who seceded from the Union, those who took up arms against the Union, broke away from the Union. They formed the Confederate States of America, including the plantations of Haywards, Heywards, the Middletons, and the Lowndes, Lowns, the Lowndes families, the Haywards, Middletons, and Lowndes families. Many of the Union soldiers who took part in the raid were former slaves who saw the burning and pillaging of these estates as an opportunity to enact revenge on the master class, enact revenge on their former slave masters. By the time Confederate forces learned of the raid, much of the damage had been done, and hundreds of slaves slipped away to freedom. A company of Confederate troops was sent to challenge the raiders. They were not successful and managed to stop only one slave from escaping to the gunboats. Confederate artillery proved almost as ineffective since none of the rounds they fired hit any of the gunboats. Harriet Tubman was the only woman known to have led a military operation during the American Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865. Thanks in great part to the intelligence she provided, the Union boats escaped unharmed, and the raid was a major military and psychological blow to the Confederate cause. But it's because of Harriet Tubman that this was able to take place. All right, so this is a bad sister on multiple levels. All right, so check out that article from blackpast.org dealing with the Combahee River raid of 1863. We'll post a link here. Blackpast.org has a lot of good articles. They have about 13,000 pages of articles dealing with African history and African American history. It's a really good source. Blackpast, P-A-S-T, blackpast.org. Back to the Washington Post article by Deneen L. Brown, whether she's on the $20 bill or not, Harriet Tubman made men pay for underestimating her. This is from May 22nd, 2019. We'll go back to that article. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. If you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. Also, you can register for the online courses that I teach. We have them all on demand in a bundle pack. It's a 10-course online bundle pack. It includes the 14-hour 7-session online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is all on demand. Watch at your own pace. Watch from around the world. You stream it. And I deal with thousands of years of history in this online bundle pack. Is on sale $40, regular $130. And also you get Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization, a online class I did dealing with that, as well as one dealing with the film Black Panther. Okay, so it's a 10-course online bundle pack. Watch from around the world. Watch at your own pace. It's all on demand. Okay, back to the article from the Washington Post. Now, after the Civil War in 1866, Harriet Tubman was traveling with a half-fare ticket from Philadelphia to New York when the conductor ordered her to move to the smoking car. According to the book Bound for the Promised Land, Harriet Tubman, Portrait of an American Hero by Kate Clifford Larson. Now, Harriet Tubman refused to budge. Quote, she explained that she was working for the government and was entitled to ride wherever she liked, end quote. She was like a Rosa Parks before Rosa Parks. Okay, a lot of people don't know this about Harriet Tubman also. Now, the conductor yelled, "We don't carry N-words for half fare." Okay, the book recounts. Then the conductor tried to pull Harriet Tubman off the train. But Harriet Tubman's legendary strength apparently outmatched him, Kate Clifford Larson wrote. Now, the conductor called for help, and 2 other men pried her fingers loose from the car, broke her arm, and threw her into the smoking car, quote, possibly breaking several of her ribs, end quote. Now, Harriet Tubman called the conductor, quote, a copperhead scoundrel, for which he choked her. A copperhead scoundrel must have been really some bad words back then in 1866. And the conductor in turn choked Harriet Tubman. Quote, she told him she did not thank anybody to call her a colored person, end quote. She preferred to be called black or Negro. Quote, she said she was she said she was as proud of being a black woman as he was of being white, end quote. She said she was as proud of being a black woman as he was of being white. Okay, because I mean, the term black was used in the 1800s, even going back to the 1700s. It just was not the dominant term for African Americans at that time. And just so we're on this topic, the term African American was not created by Jesse Jackson in 1988 or 89. Jesse Jackson and a group of African American scholars, they reintroduced the term. The earliest recorded usage of the term African American goes back to May 15th, 1782 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Washington Post has 2 articles dealing with this, okay? All right, so on March 10th, 1913, just bear with me here because we ran out of, this memory card ran out of space, which means I've been going for a little more than 90 minutes. All right, let's start with this second one here. Okay, so just so we're on this note, the term African American did not start, Reverend Jesse Jackson did not introduce the term or did not create the term African American. Okay, that's a lie to say Jesse Jackson created the term African American. No, he did not. He reintroduced the term. It was about 1988. Reverend Jesse Jackson and a group of about 30 African American scholars, they reintroduced the term African American. The earliest recorded usage of the term African American goes back to May 15th, 1782 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay. And Washington Post has a couple of articles dealing with this. Okay, just search for the history of the term African American at the Washington Post. They have 2 articles that document this. That goes back to May 15, 1782. The term Afro-American was not created in the 1960s. The earliest Afro-American goes back to the 1830s. And then you have in the early 1890s, you have the National Afro-American League, which was the first civil rights organization. 1898, you have the Afro-American Council, which was picked up the work of the National Afro-American League. That was founded by Bishop Alexander Walters and T. Thomas Fortune, and Dr. W.B. Du Bois and Ida B. Wells, and Booker T. Washington. They were members of the Afro-American Council. And then the Afro-American Council splits. By 1903, you had two factions. You had a pro Booker T. Washington faction and a pro Dr. W.B. Du Bois faction. And out of the Afro-American Council comes the Niagara Movement of 1905. Okay, it would Ida B. Wells and Dr. W.B. Du Bois. So 1905, the Niagara Movement starts, and then the Niagara Movement, out of from the Niagara Movement, you're going to get the NAACP 1909. In about the 57 or so founders of the NAACP, only about 7 were African Americans. Okay. But the NAACP is going to come out of that Niagara movement because of the Springfield, Illinois race riot of 1908, it's determined that maybe they need a interracial approach to the race problem. Maybe they need an interracial organization to tackle the race problem, tackle the lynchings, fight for the federal anti-lynching law, etc. So the NAACP is going to be created. You can go to NAACP.org, NAACP.org, and click on history because they break down some of the history of the NAACP. Okay, so on March 10th, 1913, Harriet Tubman died of pneumonia in Auburn, New York. She often said she never failed to deliver her passengers to freedom. Quote, on my Underground Railroad, I never run my train off the track. I never lost a passenger. Okay, end quote, she said. All right, so this is some background history dealing with Harriet Tubman. Name of that article once again from Deneen L. Brown for the Washington Post. Whether she's on the $20 bill or not, Harriet Tubman made men pay for underestimating her. Okay, and this deals with and I talked about the article from the New York Times dealing with Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill, and that actually being delayed till about the year 2028, according to Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Okay, so check out those articles, study this history. This is some really deep history, which ties into the history of slavery, the Underground Railroad, ties into Harriet Tubman, ties into the suffrage movement and the right for women to get the right to vote. Okay. Yeah, it ties into the movement for women to get the right to vote, ties into the 19th Amendment of 1920, okay, as well. And we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment also. Also ties into the Voting Rights Act of 1965 as well. And we know the Voting Rights Act was gutted. Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was gutted by the U.S. Supreme Court case of Shelby County versus Holder of 2013, which weakened the oversight of the Voting Rights Act. And right after that, you had all these new states that came out with new voter ID laws. So in the 2016 presidential election, we know there 14 new states had new voter ID laws to help suppress the African-American vote, help suppress the youth vote, because youth are more likely to vote for Democrats than Republicans. All this took place. Read articles from thenation.com dealing with the 2016 election. They had a really good, they had a number of good articles written by Ari Berman, Ari Berman for The Nation. One of them was dealing with how there were 868 fewer polling places in the 2016 election. And this is because of the rapid voter suppression that was taking place. Okay, we'll post a link to this article. There are 868 fewer places to vote in 2016 because the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act Okay, but unfortunately, many African Americans don't even understand the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and say, oh, we don't need it and all this stuff. No, we don't understand history and law. That's the problem. We don't understand history and law. All right, so everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Okay. In our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. And African American business owners, post name your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network as well. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We have another new advertiser. We know summer is coming up and people are trying to get in shape for the summer. I'm back working out, getting tight for the summer as well myself. But the Fast Life 28-Day Challenge is here to help you. The Fast Life 28-Day Challenge. Visit that website, tfl28.com. tfl28.com. Are you ready to lose weight and inches off your waist? Do you want to increase your energy, improve blood sugars and blood pressure readings, conquer food addiction and cravings? Now, the Fast Life 28-Day Challenge is an online coaching program to help members tap into their body's natural ability to repair itself via fasting. In this challenge, they focus on utilizing fasting, whole foods, and movement to improve metabolic conditions such as obesity, high blood pressure, pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Okay, you may see some of the Facebook Live videos we share from Edward Williams. Okay, Edward Williams is one of the coaches in this Fast Life 28-Day Challenge. All right, and they also have a online, also have a Facebook group online to help you with this challenge as well. All right. Now, there's a $50 off early bird discount. They have a new cohort starting up soon. So this is a 4-week, 28-day challenge using 5 habits for 28 days. Your journey to health will be backed and supported by a growing community inside of their private Facebook group, in addition to their team of health coaches who will provide guidance as well as hold you accountable. Visit their website, tfl28.com, tfl28.com for the Fast Life 28-Day Challenge. All right, so we have to get out of here. Remember, listen to the African History Network show Sunday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF. And we'll broadcast on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. We post all those videos on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep as well. And visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All this information is at our website. My DVD lectures, a recommended reading list of books, the online courses, all of that. Okay. So remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.